Hey everyone, Mystical Mark here. So this will be your intuitive astrology forecast for December 21st to the 27th of 2025. I had to think about that one for a second. In this video, I will intuitively tune into my own higher self to get the overall energetic vibes of each aspect that is occurring this week, as well as an overall energy at the end of the video, or kind of the main energy for the week. Now, what I do here is mundane astrology. This is not an all signs or sun sign forecast, as my guidance has been. Those are simply just not accurate. Reason being, you need to take into account your entire chart if you want something that's going to be more specific to you, and not just a teensy tiny little bit of it, because you're not really getting anything out of that. That being said, mundane astrology is, of course, how this affects us globally, whether it's politically, economically, that kind of stuff. Okay, of course, I do offer personal readings if anyone is interested. Excuse me. My God. I do offer personal readings if anyone is interested. You can head on over to mysticalmark.ca and have a look there. And I'm offering a promotion until December 31st, 2025. If you use the code HOLIDAY at checkout, you get 50% off your reading. Okay, the links are also in the description below if you're interested. That being said, as I say at the beginning of all of my videos, my guidance has been and likely always will be, astrology is an energetic template conducive to certain things. Meaning, the analogy they gave me, it's like a formula of math. There are variables that exist within that formula, and we are able to adjust those variables due to free will. That also being said, what I do here is intuitive. So if I make any kind of prediction regarding the future going forward, it is always subject to change. What I get is what is on path right now. However, that can always change due to free will. Okay, that is for any intuitive reading. Absolutely nothing is set in stone. You may have an end goal, but there are always multiple paths or detours or whatever to get to that point. All right, now let's get into the charts for this week. Okay, we're obviously going to start off here on Sunday, December 21st. Okay, and of course on this day is when we're going to have the December solstice. Now, my guidance is, of course, that not really to touch on sun signs that much, as the sun really just illuminates the energy of the sign that it is in. Okay, that's really all that it is. That being said, let me tune in here to the sun coming into Capricorn. Initially, what I already get is it just feels like Capricorn. I say this with every solar ingress. It just feels like the sign that it's in. This just feels like Capricorn. Okay, I part of the reason why I'm saying this and doing this, and for me to do the astrology in the way that I do, is to show that we've really been duped in a lot of ways in terms of what we've been manipulated into believing in terms of what astrology really is. There shouldn't be a focus on your sun sign. There really shouldn't, because that's just a very minor part to your chart. And in fact, you may have a stronger energy in your chart that is not your sun that you may feel more related to. But you wouldn't know that unless you looked at your entire chart, right? So your sun sign, in some ways, in certain parts of your life, can be completely irrelevant. All right? Anyways, that being said, that is the December solstice. That is why I don't do any short form content on this stuff. I do it usually on major ingresses and stuff like that, etc. But I don't do it for the sun because my guidance is it's somewhat irrelevant, really. We go through all these same cycles every single year, and it's just illuminating that same energy each time. Now, what the sun is aspecting of what it's doing in that sense, that matters. However, its actual ingress, etc., just, yeah. Anyway, let's move on. So on this day, speaking of aspects, the sun will be in this quintile here to the north node. Now, okay, what I feel like is laying the foundation, putting in the groundwork, using this solid foundation. There's a solid foundation. Okay, it's just putting in the groundwork, laying in what I've already said in terms of this movement forward in this new direction. However, this feels like it's happening a lot more behind the scenes and not really full front. It's not hidden, but it's also not necessarily at the forefront, despite the fact that it feels actually quite important. Okay, this is like what I feel like is the groundwork being done, Sun and Capricorn, regarding this movement forward, ultimately in a very positive and new direction. Excuse me, so maybe pay attention to that. Okay, groundwork being done to really move forward in that new direction. But it may not be to the full front Yeah. Anyway, I already said it. Okay. Also on this day, we're going to have Jupiter here in square to Chiron retrograde. Jupiter retrograde and square to Chiron retrograde. Okay, so what I feel actually is something that should have already occurred surrounding what Jupiter is trying to bring back to us. Ultimately, what I kind of related this to, especially in the previous video, was peace. Peace. The surrounding aspects of sovereignty, individuality. Now, what I get is this is related on like a country level, in terms of individual countries. Individuality, sovereignty. Obviously, this is a mundane astrology video. And this is, we're going over old ground with these retrogrades here. And I feel like that's what's related to, is this already should have been dealt with. This already should have been dealt with. Already should have been dealt with. But it's being dealt with now. But it already should have been dealt with. Okay? That's all I'm going to say about that. That's all I'm feeling to say about that. We're also going to have the sun here as well in this semi-sextile to a black moon Lilith, which has now moved into Sagittarius. Okay. What I feel like is this positive growth and expansion away from where we have been hurt or put upon or outcasted, that kind of energy, as that's what Lilith kind of deals with. But it feels like more boundaries in place and putting in the work or making the groundwork to enact that growth and expansion away from that outcasted energy and bringing it and expanding it into a more positive space. It's sometimes hard to really articulate how I feel with these things, but it's kind of like she's understanding what needs to be done, but it's really putting in the work to enact that in that way. Okay, again, that's all I'm going to say about that. All right, so that is Sunday the 21st. Let's move on to Monday the 22nd here. The only thing that I see on this day is Venus here now in conjunction to Juno. What this feels like is, what I get is like levels of people. So that Venus is like people that are working under those that have created these committed partnerships and contracts. And they're working with almost like to enact, or almost like working with these partnerships and contracts, as in these partnerships and contracts are working, okay, as in they're being put into force. They're being put into force, and there's people that are behind them that are working for those that have created that to put them into force. Okay, and of course these are like global we're dealing with Sagittarian energy, so this is like multiple like global contracts. What I feel like is multiple like global contracts, whether that's economic or countrywide, etc. That is these people working to what I feel is like enact them, or what I've already said. Okay, that's the vibe that I get with that. Okay, and that's all I've got here for Monday the 22nd. So let's move on here to Tuesday the 23rd. And of course, this is when we're going to have Venus in quincunx to Uranus retrograde. Okay. Again, it feels like this is stuff that should have already occurred. It's like we're cleaning up somebody else's mess. We're cleaning up somebody else's mess because it's like a lot of this stuff should have already have been dealt with, and there's people that are involved here in a lot of things regarding this aspect of it. It feels like shifting the value more towards the people involved, etc., and not just putting the value so much on like money or like wanting to gain money and power and control. It's putting that focus more on the people. This feels more humanitarian, is seeing the value in the things that actually do have value and not that which is just made up, like money. And yes, money is made up. It's all made up. It's 100% made up. Anyway, and if you're saying, well, it has value and we use it, yes, because we put a value on it. We make that up. Okay? The beep agrees. Okay? We make that up. Okay? Yeah. Anyways. But yeah, this is something that should have already have been dealt with in terms of the changes, really the changes that have had to be made. And it's like the people that are dealing with this, it's like this already, we're cleaning up somebody else's mess here. And regarding this seeing the value for the people, etc., that kind of stuff, and not in these other things. It's what it is, cleaning up somebody else's mess. And that's where that frustration or that incongruent kind of energy really comes into play here with that quincunx in this sense. We also have Mercury here in a biquintile to Jupiter retrograde. Okay. What do we got? It almost feels like there is more of a communication of maybe frustration of actually what has going on behind the scenes that was hidden surrounding what didn't occur that should have occurred. Seems to be an overbearing theme in last week's video and in this one too. Somewhat in last week's, but more so in this one. As kind of what I feel with this in terms of what should have been done, and I feel like that's relating to that Jupiter retrograde energy in terms of what is now being brought back to us that should have already been done. And it feels like there's a lot of negative back-end stuff that has occurred, and there's now awareness, there's a communicating surrounding this that is now occurring. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. Also, we're going to have the Sun in semi-sextile to Pluto. This really feels like putting the foot down and laying boundaries towards newness. Towards making the new, towards making progress. Okay, so we're setting boundaries towards things that are against newness and making progress. Okay, so that those things, they feel like old things, no longer interfere, so that we can continue to move forward and make progress. Now, will we see it as such? Probably not, because things are probably still being manipulated or whatever, because if we keep fighting each other, then we won't come together and actually try to create that better world, right? Then we're more easily controlled if we're in a state of fear, fighting each other, etc. Whereas if we're in a state of peace and harmony and moving forward, like the direction in which a lot of this stuff is moving forward in, we're empowered. See the difference here? See why the world is or was the way that it was, and how it's tough to move in this new direction? Even though this new direction is what's best for us, because everybody's been so manipulated into believing that what we've been taught and shown is how it should be, when actually there is something better. But we just don't understand that. Yeah, but this is setting boundaries towards pushing towards positive transformation and change. Okay. Also, we're going to have Venus here in square to Neptune. Okay. Neptune over here in Pisces. This feels like a positive force as it relates to people, positive people, and things that are really working behind the scenes to push for a lot of this positive growth and expansion, of which I've already talked about. Okay, there's a lot of people in the background involved in this I can feel the very positive energy surrounding this that we just don't see. But it's there and it's happening. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. That's Tuesday the 23rd. Let's move on to Wednesday the 24th. Wednesday the 24th, we're going to have Venus now coming into Capricorn. Okay, so Venus entering into Capricorn. Okay, Venus coming into Capricorn. Sorry, my mind is drifting on other things here. Venus coming into Capricorn. This, I feel like boundaries set towards certain people, and also people being made to put in the work in an appropriate way. This feels very much setting boundaries towards certain people and forcing accountability. And having them put in the appropriate work. So setting boundaries, forcing accountability, and have them put in appropriate work. What I get is almost like a dog with its tail between its legs kind of an energy, as people maybe being called out. Not necessarily called out, but it's like, okay, you can't do this. We're moving in this new positive direction. This you can't do. You've been getting away with this for too long. You shouldn't have. Enough is enough. That's what that energy feels like. Okay? And it feels like more on like a global political leader kind of a level. In terms of they're the ones saying and setting the boundaries, not necessarily leaders being knocked off. All right? So that's that. We're also going to have Venus in quintile to the North Node here. I feel like it's related to what I already said in terms of there's that stuff. What I feel like with this quintile is more behind the scenes with this aspect. That other part is still at the forefront, but there's more going on behind the scenes is what I feel like with this in terms of our movement forward in a positive new direction, whether we see it that way or not. Okay, we're also going to have Uranus in quincunx here to Juno. What I feel with this is there may be changes needed in terms of certain partnerships and contracts, either economically or politically or whatever, between nations that are surrounding these aspects of, well, it feels like change that just simply needs to occur. It feels like it's economically more so. There's a frustration surrounding that as there's people that haven't held up their end of the bargain, or people that haven't, that have been not really so nice behind the scenes. They've been trying to manipulate certain things or whatever. And there's a frustration surrounding that, and that's what's pushing that being brought to an end in terms of the changes in those certain contracts. Okay, and of course it's probably going to be manipulated by the media or shown which way or whatever, but that's just what I'm saying with that. Okay. Also, we're going to have Mercury here in semi-square to Pluto. Okay, so Mercury, you can see the semi-square there in blue to Pluto. All right. What I feel like is it almost seems like more of a harsh communication going out there surrounding growth and expansion, but of course how it relates to where we need to progress and change. And this feels like very much laying down, okay, I'm being drawn to the fact that Mercury's North Node is in Capricorn, so there's a bit of this vibe that is flowing with this Mercury energy, even though Mercury's in Sagittarius, that is really kind of setting the tone here to push forward. There's very strong communication regarding that has that Capricornian-esque kind of a vibe, but to really push towards positive transformation and change and move forward. This feels like relating to maybe setting a boundary, calling someone out, that kind of an energy that is related to that. Remember, Mars is also in Capricorn as well, so taking action on those things is what is a relatable energy to this. Now, we're also going to have Venus here in semi-sextile to Black Moon Lilith, which is now in Sagittarius. What I feel with this is, yeah, there's boundaries being set towards certain people, and no longer allowing certain things to be outcasted or put upon, etc. Lilith is happy, but she's understands the coldness of this Capricornian energy and is allowing it to go through because it needs to be done in terms of what these people may have done, and we're probably not going to be shown it in the way that I'm saying it. That's just how it is. Okay, but yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. So that's Wednesday the 24th. Let's move on to, Thursday the 25th here, where we're just going to have this Sun in biquintile to Uranus. Okay, so Sun biquintile to Uranus. I feel like this is more, what I get is not necessarily related to this aspect, but it's more of a quiet day, as it is Christmas Day in North America and a lot of parts of the world. Okay, and so there's not necessarily a lot going on the world stage. Things are, quiet, so to speak. But I guess I'm feeling related to this, as in this energy it's still there, but it may show up like before. It feels like more after the fact of this day that this will show up. Now, this feels like, I feel like there's a backing up of the changes, what it feels like is changes that already should have occurred or should have been happened or should have made, but there's it's being backed up by this Capricornian energy, and it feels like an underlying force or an underlying energy that's supporting it, is what that feels like. And I feel like that's being pushed through. What it feels like is more 26th, like the 26th kind of an energy, pushing it to that day. But there's an underlying force here that is helping with that kind of stuff. All right. With that being said, let's move on here to Friday the 26th. Now on this day, we're going to have Venus here now in semi-sextile to Pluto. What I get with this initial, these boundaries being in place towards these people, etc., that now there's a change up in terms of maybe their positions being taken over by other people, or other kinds of things surrounding the positive aspects of change and transformation that are needing to occur with that. Okay, that's all I kind of get for that day. Let's move on to Saturday, the 27th. And of course, on the 27th here, we're going to have this first moon quarter. So Sun in Capricorn, Moon, where am I here? Moon in Aries. With that Moon in Aries, I feel like there's a passionate drive forward here, and being concrete, in almost like setting in a foundation to move forward through aspects of setting those boundaries, what I feel like towards other people or towards whatever. That's what I feel like with that, is being more concrete in those boundaries, in that shift forward. It feels like nothing can fuck with it, kind of an energy with that. All right, with that quarter moon. Okay, we're also going to have Mercury here. Where are we? Mercury here in quincunx to Jupiter retrograde. Okay. With that, I feel there's a frustration of awareness in terms of where we already should have been. In terms of what I get is growth and expansion. And through nurturing that growth and expansion, we already should have been a lot further ahead than what we are. And there's a frustration with that. And I feel like with that Mercury, it feels like instead of communication, it's a lack of communication, but that in itself is communication if you're not saying anything, kind of a thing, as you're just recognizing that for what it is through that awareness, is what I feel with that energy. Also on this day, we're going to have Venus here. I'm being also drawn to say that these aspects, just because the aspects are peaking on a certain day, doesn't mean that that specifically happens on that day. Obviously, there's energy builds up to that point, it peaks, and then it falls off. So you still have days before and days after in which these things can occur, so it's not necessarily specific on that day. I'm just saying it on the day in which the energy will peak, okay? I'm being drawn to say that for whatever reason. Also, we're going to have Venus here in this biquintile to Uranus retrograde, okay, down here. Okay, so Venus and biquintile, Uranus retrograde. It feels more of where we should have been in terms of what it feels like, the people that should have been in place where they should have been in place. Whatever that means. It feels like it feels more like politically or economically or in some kind of higher level of whether it's government or control or whatever. The people that should have been there already instead of the douchebags that were there. That's kind of the energy that I feel, and that I don't know if they're actual douchebags or what, but I'm just kind of along those lines, but just so you don't think that, because I don't know who these people are or what specifically is going on, so I don't want to say anything, but that's kind of what it feels like, okay? But this feels like, and these changes that are really being pushed now surrounding this. It feels very positive, and it feels like there's an underlying energy that is coming through here from another unknown place is what it feels like, that is supporting this shift, this change, and ultimately through the shift in people. Okay. Also on this day is we're going to have Mercury in trine to Chiron retrograde. What I feel like is this is an awareness of what went wrong in terms of these wounds, in terms of whatever. It doesn't feel like speaking out again. This feels more solemn in terms of just an awareness of what went wrong, in terms of a lot of things, in terms of like it feels like countries, independence, sovereignty, that kind of stuff. An awareness of what went wrong. And I feel like through that Chiron retrograde is the previous of what went wrong that is coming through with that. And where we hurt ourselves, ultimately, or where we've been hurt in that way. And that's collectively, countries as a whole, that kind of thing. We've also got here Juno will be in quintile to the North Node. So what I feel with this is it feels like new partnerships that are helping to push forward in new direction. This feels oddly very positive and very new, very, I can't even describe it. It feel like people are actually working for pushing this towards the right reasons and not the wrong ones anymore, despite what we may be shown. Okay, I'm going to keep saying that. And moving forward in a new positive direction, even though it may be unknown, it feels like it's known to these people, even if it's not known to the collective. That new positive direction, and it feels very positive. Okay, we're also going to have Neptune here in square to Juno. So again, I feel like that's related to this positive energy that's maybe behind the scenes and pushing this, is what I've said before, that hidden energy that exists and helping to push this. What I feel is there's support coming from that regarding the people that are involved in these partnerships and contracts to enact this movement forward. But it feels very behind the scenes type of stuff that we just don't see quite yet. Okay? So that is that, and we've gotten to the end of the week here, so let me just bring it back to me so I can see me. Okay, so let me just tune in here, and I just want to touch on the fact that this last bit at the end of the week feels like there's Christmas energy, the end of Christmas energy tied into what I've already said. What that means, I don't really understand. Take that for what you will. Okay, overall energy for this week. What have we got? it feels like that change in people and the setting of boundaries towards that kind of an energy is what I feel with that, is the overall highlighted energy for the week. And it feels kind of like defeating at the end, almost like feeling defeated at the end of that, like you had to do it, and it's like yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. But yeah, if you have made it this far in the video, please leave a purple heart in the comments so that I know you're a real one. And of course, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in next week's video. Take care, everyone. Bye.